Okay, I'll call this January 11th meeting of the York County Planning Commission to order. First item is not on our agenda. I'd like to welcome Montreo Belton, representing District 7, his first meeting. Thank you very much for volunteering your time.
Thank you.
All right, election of officers is the first item.
I make a motion to nominate Jamie Henriksen as chair.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Do we want to vote on this, or do we want to nominate vice chair and then vote on it all together?
You can vote, you can elect the chairman.
Okay,
That'd be
do that
fine.
first?
Yes.
All right, all in favor? Thank you. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
Nominate Jennifer Bowman.
I'll second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? All right.
That's assuming you still want to do it.
Okay, any changes to the agenda? All right, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Moved.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor? All right, thank you. And adoption of the minutes. Any discussion on the minutes? Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. On to item number 1, subdivision Sanders Landing. I'm sorry.
There's a
Yep.
discussion item.
Sorry. So who's going to be presenting the TIA? Thank you.
Is there a button for, is this already on? Okay. Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Christopher Stevens.
I'm sorry, can you lean down a little bit towards the mic?
And if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's really hard to hear up
you're
here.
far enough away from us.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Christopher Stevens. I'm the York County Transportation Planner. There should be a memo that was in the packet to kind of go over that TIA mitigation. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read that. I'm going to do a little overview of that memo. Okay, so TIAs. The TIA evaluates the potential adverse effects of proposed projects on the surrounding supporting transportation network. York County uses TIAs as a component to make informed decisions regarding rezonings, applications, preliminary plats, site plans, and some special exceptions. We have 2 levels of tiers in the county, a tier 1 and tier 2. So the tier 1s are for the smaller projects that generate a small number of trips, and the tier 2s are for the larger developments that generate 400 average daily trips a day or greater, 100 peak hour AM and PM trips. The tier 2 TIA evaluates also, let me back up for a second. And also, if it's a residential development that proposes 30 lots or greater, they're required to do a tier 2. The tier 2s will be required for development at intersections that have known issues with the level of service. And the data collection elements for tier 2s, TIAs can include trip generation, trip distribution, roadway capacity, traffic safety, and current and future level of service. The level of service is a qualitative measure used to evaluate the condition of motor vehicle traffic flow. A traffic engineer analyzes characteristics such as speed, movement, vehicle spacing, signal delays along roadways, and specific intersections. York County TIAs normally focus on roadway capacity. There's other components to the level of service, but like I said, we typically just look at it from a capacity standpoint. The level of service has a value that is assigned to it from a letter of A through F, representing the function of the roadway or intersection. LOS-A represents the freest flowing of intersections, and the LOS down to LOS-F, which is the failing intersection with constant problems. Intersections within a reasonable distance of a proposed project are evaluated to determine the LOS of current, future, and no-build conditions. The county's TIE guidelines and methodologies allows the county to evaluate the overall intersection or a segment or leg of that intersection. So the configuration can vary from 3 to 4 legs of an intersection. So a failing leg doesn't always mean that the overall intersection is failing. So you have instances where you might have one that's an F, the other 3 are an A, and so the overall is an LOS-B. The county recognizes the traffic LOS as one performance measure that is carefully weighted against other objectives to develop safe and efficient circulation system. The county has adopted the LOS standard, which must be maintained for future build conditions evaluated in the TIA. So the intersections involving minor streets must maintain a LOS-C or better. And if it's a major street, it must maintain LOS-D or better. I'm going to go through an example of an intersection that is failing, and it's on the developer to bring that intersection back up to satisfactory LOS. So I'm going to use Powers Cove residential subdivision as an example. And we're going to look at the intersection of Highway 274, Autumn Cove, and Powers Cove Drive. So this is a aerial of the intersection. The intersection in the red circle is what we're going to focus on. To the north is Crowder's Creek Elementary, and to the left is Powers Cove subdivision. And I just kind of zoomed in a little closer to that intersection of Powers Cove Drive, Autumn Cove, and Highway 274. So in the AM, about 85% of the traffic is making a left turn at this intersection. I would imagine a lot of the people who work there maybe live there, maybe work in Charlotte, and also due to proximity of the school, people dropping their kids off and are leaving. So there's a heavy left turn movement there. So when we look at the LOSs, and I'm mainly focusing at 2025, no build towards the bottom, their third one from the bottom. It's operating at LOS-C in the AM, and it's operating at an A in the PM. So then when we look down to the build without the improvement, it drops to an E. And so this is where the LOS needs to be brought back up to LOS-D or better. And it's a D in the PM, but that is satisfactory, so that's okay there. And below that is build, and it should be build with improvements. And so the improvements that they're recommending will bring it back up to LOS-D, which is satisfactory. And so the improvements that is recommended is implementation of dual eastbound left turn lanes, 175 foot of storage, in addition of a protected eastbound left turn phase, northbound left turn lane, 150 foot of storage striped, and updated signal timing. So we'll take a look at that intersection one more time, and so we'll look at that intersection, and to the left is, we can kind of, where those cars are kind of queued up, we have one left turn lane, and the other lane is a through and a right turn lane. So if you kind of remember, there's 85% movement is left in the morning, and so that's kind of backing up. So so what they're recommending is adding a second left turn lane at that location for the AM peak. And so since this, they were required to make this improvement, this is what it looks like now. They've added that second, so we have dual lefts. And so this is a built environment. I think the last planning commission meeting, it was brought up that, when do we go back and look at intersections and, to see if those improvements are making a difference as far as LOS. And so we don't typically usually go back and look at them unless another study is in that area, or in this case, the build out for this is they had to update the TIA. So they updated it in 2020, so this past year. And so we can actually take a look at the intersections. Another thing I'll note is that the TIA guidelines and methodologies has been updated. So now we're kind of asking them to show all the legs, where before we just looked at just the overall intersection, LOS. So now we're seeing all of it. And if you look at the eastbound, which is that movement, in the AM, it's now saying a D in the AM and PM. And if you look up at the overall intersection level of service, it's a C. So before it was projected that it'd be a D. It's actually a little better than we thought. So it's a C in the AM and PM for this improvement. Now I'll do an example of a proportionate share mitigation. I'm gonna look at a mixed-use development.
Chris, let me ask, can you go back a
Sure.
slide?
Sure.
All right. How do you anticipate build for the future?
As far as just, so I mean, that's full build out.
Yeah,
So when the development is, so Powers Cove, they're still working on another phase, so they're not fully built out yet, but they basically look at the numbers again at all the intersections, and so this is their projections for full build out. So with all of it complete, all of the development complete.
who establishes, I'm thinking about other intersections, who establishes what a full build out, think of the one we got tonight, what is it, Sanford, something or other, Sanders Landing. There's a lot of land around there.
Right.
All right, and how does one anticipate, I don't remember what all the zoning is, but how does one anticipate a build out
Right.
of that?
So full build out is for that development, for all of the projected trips for that development. So when it's all built out, we consider that full build out. So we can't take into account any other land that is not built out. They'll have to come in and do a TIA and look at the intersection again.
And I don't remember what the land around that, the Sanders Landing and is, what the other land is zoned, but
Right.
obviously there's going to be more building.
Right, and that's when they'll be required to do a TIA, and we'll look at that intersection again, and reevaluate it, if that makes sense.
And you'll have a projection of a full build out of the land piece by piece. Each piece is a full build out?
So if a new development comes in, and they'll basically have their own full build out of what they consider full build out.
Yes.
for their year. And so the TIAs, in a sense, they kind of build on each other, but once it's a built environment, you won't count that anymore. You're just looking at, you'd look at that as existing or background traffic.
Right.
So anything that comes along, they'll just have to do a TIA, and we'll examine it at that time.
Okay.
You got it?
Thank you for the answer. I don't think it's simple, but
Don't we apply some kind of a growth rate to kind of capture what is happening in that
Right.
area? So we do
say that
apply,
again, Diane, what?
we do apply a growth rate, a general overall growth rate to the area, which would then help to be able to allocate or identify there's going to be other things coming to the development, to the area. So that will capture other projects coming in. So we do apply, and that's agreed upon before we do the scoping process, an actual growth rate.
So that's a percentage that'll be calculated in when we're looking at the numbers. So, your average growth rate is 3%, and just depends on how much growth is happening. If it's not a lot of growth happening, even though there's a lot of land, you might have a low growth rate, but it just depends. That number changes.
Is that evaluated on any regular basis? Kind of like we have to do an overall plan every 5 years?
It's evaluated on every TIA. We look at the growth rate. And
Only
it's-
as development occurs then, right?
Right, because if no development's happening, then there's no real growth. No growth rate to really apply. So if it's an area that's just stagnant.
Thank you.
I have just one question about the LOS. So if it's an A, could you give me an example of what's acceptable backup for A? It says the free is flowing, so that means there's no backup for A, is that?
Right, it's
Okay.
just free flowing.
And then it just goes down
Right, it
the further,
degrades.
okay. Thank you.
So in your example, did Paddler's Creek pay for they paid for the entire work to be done?
Right, they were required to since they dropped that LOS.
Okay. And the only value I can see in periodically going back and checking yourself is sort of to build further and further intel on the planning part, right? Like
Right.
you estimated 60, it would get you to 40, it would get you to 49. It actually got you to 47, so you can improve your modeling periodically. That would be the value to me in going back and just picking a statistically significant number to reevaluate.
Just out of curiosity, in taking that intersection, did Autumn Cove, did the developer of Autumn Cove have to pay any kind of mitigation expense at all? Or was that before all this?
So there was no expense paid because they paid for it in full, since it was, you said Autumn Cove, right, for Paddler's Cove?
Yeah.
That improvement, because since they dropped it, if it dropped below the LOS, like I said, they were required to build it in full. So it was 100% on the developer to make that improvement.
On the Autumn Cove side?
On the Autumn Cove side, yes, they would, if they degraded it, then if they dropped it, then yes, they're required to make that improvement as well.
Would you know if they did? I mean.
It was more on that left movement that I was showing earlier. That was really where it dropped, because it went to an E
On the Paddler's Cove
on
side?
Paddler's Cove
Yeah,
side.
the
But
Autumn
it-
Cove side has been there pretty much for decades. I mean, that's.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm
Yeah, so
getting at.
they-
We have a
it
level
didn't-
of
right, so
congestion
they-
created, but
Right, but when that went in, it didn't create enough of an issue to require it. So then it would all be on Paddler's Cove, because
Right.
they're the ones that
Caused the
degraded.
problem.
Right, you can't go back to a builder that's not even building anymore in Autumn Cove and ask them to pay for it.
Well, now, if it did happen on the Autumn Cove side, if Paddler's Cove calls it, let's say we flipped that and it failed on that side, then Paddler's Cove would have had to make that improvement at 100%. So it still applied, but that's just where it just failed on Paddler's Cove side. But it doesn't really matter. Just if they make it drop, they have to bring it back, no matter which section of the leg it fails on. All right, so I'll move towards the example of the proportionate share of mitigation. And like I said, this is in Fort Mill, and I'm gonna use improvement at the intersection of SE 160, Pleasant, and Sutton Road. So the blue dot is where the proposed development is located, and that's a mixed use. There's a Take 5, I believe there's a restaurant and a retail, so it's, it's a mix of things. And so looking at the intersection circled in red, that's just a closer shot of that. And so this development, so the LOS of this intersection is operating at an LOSE on the existing, no build and build. So on this example, it's already failing, and they increased the delay. So this is where they would make a contribution towards the improvement at the intersection of Pleasant and 160. It's already been identified that the southbound right turn lane is needed with 150 foot of storage, and a westbound right turn lane with 250 foot of storage is needed at this intersection. There's been some other developments in the area that have already kind of made contributions at this intersection. This is the geometric layout of it, and this is what those improvements would look like. The Earth Fair has made a contribution of $200,000 to this intersection. There's a hotel to the north that's made a $22,000 contribution, and so we have numerous developments that have made a contribution to this. So it's still haven't quite built this one yet, but we're getting closer to being able to start on this project.
Chris, will you help me with my bearing? Where is Earth Fair on this?
Okay, so Earth Fair is going to be to the west.
Down.
To the
Okay.
got
Thank
it.
you.
And so that's kind of where we are on this one. And so the development that I highlighted earlier, they made $40,000 contribution towards this intersection. And so
Excuse me, who is they?
that developer,
I don't mean by name, but
by name,
which,
you want to go back?
the Blue Dot developer?
Right.
Okay.
So that's where, yeah. So
Okay.
this developer, like as I explained earlier, was some mix of different uses there, and so their impact, based off the delay that they created at this intersection, and the necessary improvements comes to it was $40,000 contribution towards that intersection
All
improvement.
right, so that I understand, this is going back, this Sanders Landing business that we postponed. The improvement we're talking about here is only the additional improvement, which are two right turn lanes to
Right.
alleviate that problem.
Right.
And the calculation of the cost is based only on those two right turn lanes.
Correct. In their percentage of the delay that they increase at that intersection. So it's the total cost to construct those improvements, and it's the percentage of the increase in delay. So that their percentage that's how the percentage is calculated.
So what's the total cost?
I don't have the total. Yeah, this one's pretty high.
Yeah, it's over $1 million, I believe, for this intersection improvement.
Yeah, this one's pretty high.
And we calculated, or do we do the calculation, or does the
Engineering.
the engine-
Well, The,
The county, I mean, or an outside person?
the traffic engineer is required to get that estimate, and engineering will check that estimate to make sure that, they believe that estimate is accurate. But it's on the traffic engineer to come up with the estimate.
Did I understand you to say that the Blue Dot people contributed $40,000
Correct.
out of $1 million?
It was this was a small increase in delay, so they didn't make a very large increase to that delay, so they're not paying as much.
Who's paying the rest?
200,000
So,
from,
all right, so you've accumulated how much total then?
so 200,000 from the Earth-Fair, they're on the hook for another 200,000, so if you want to look at it as 400,000 from them. There was a Lidl that is kind of stalled, but they were looking for at 100,000 contribution. There was a Lidl.
Okay.
That project has stalled. So a collection of.
Hotel too, they've paid.
And that
Did they pay
hotel,
towards that?
it was 22,000 for the hotel, north on Pleasant. You can kind of see it on this shot where
It's been
it's had some
cleared.
grade. They kind of graded over there. And that's 22,000 came from that, development. And so it's all kind of pulled together, to build these two turn lanes.
So when it was determined that we should have 2 turn lanes, was that based off of what was asking for development at that time? Or did it anticipate that, oh, you could develop where the Blue Dot is and you could develop down the street? Like, do we know that 2 lanes, which got sized at, let's just call it $1 million, was really gonna be able to handle the potential traffic that was coming down the road? Like really, did we need 4 lanes? And so those first developments actually didn't pay a proportionate share.
Right, and so I believe it was the Earth-Fair is where the cost estimate, because that was the largest impact in the area. So that's where the cost estimates were when they were calculated and the improvement. And so the smaller ones, like I said, they're contributing to it, but it's, that they're maybe not making as, they're not increasing the delay to that extent where they're making large contributions. But as far as, I guess, is your question more, will these improvements, so many years from now, will there still be kind of mitigating those impacts? Is that kind of
do we
sort of the question?
do we look 5 years out, right? Like, I know you can't know that the Blue Dot people are coming, but it is available space, and based off the trend, we seem to want, we keep developing. So I'm just concerned, I guess my question just comes out of, we made a sizing, we decided that amount was what was needed.
Right.
Did it anticipate the additional growth that was gonna happen in the time before we actually built the lanes?
I think some of it is kind of what's needed to, just based off of the geometric layout, kind of. And so I don't know if they're forecasting that far to say, well, this is improvement that's going to be, because really looking at what is needed. And so that same need is still needed, those turn lanes. Unless there's a larger project that comes in that, changes that and says, well, look, this isn't enough. Then, we would then look at, what that improvement, what that would look like going forward for collecting for this intersection.
And do we build the intersection once all the money's been collected? Like, when do we build it?
Once all of the money, once enough is collected to build it. And there, there's times when, other funding could come in that could expedite that process.
So we go ahead and build it, knowing it's gonna cause a failing situation to fail even more, and we sort of wait till we get enough money. And I wonder, in the case of like a Earth Fair where they went out of business, maybe we never get the other 200,000, and so then we never get to improve the intersection?
I think they are reopening,
But for example,
yeah.
Doesn't that second half, though, kick in for a second development? So that extra money is when they're going to develop a couple more sites near Earth Fair. So when those sites get developed, that will then kick in. So they've paid for the earth fair portion of that, I believe.
Correct. And so the other that was, that they were looking at was office. I think it was 200,000 square foot of.
Yeah, so they'll be
office.
opening up some additional office space next to Earth Fair, and when they get built, then they'll go ahead and apply that.
And
Chris,
that's
if you can zoom into the actual close-up of the location, two things to answer some of your questions is we're, no, just forward to the next, there's a zoom-in picture. So advance your slides to the zoom-in one.
Oh,
Yeah, keep on going to where it actually shows the improvements.
okay.
So two things is they're limited to space and where they can actually put in there. So there is a function of how much space do we have here and how can we maximize that space available with some turn lanes. That's one function. The other one, as far as is it big enough, is that there is that growth model. So they will take how many, what's the growth for the area, and they'll model that. And will these 2 lanes, how much will they be able to move traffic? So that would kind of help us to get a better feel for, will this actually function better or will this actually work? So those are the 2 components that they'll use in the analysis to see whether this will actually help solve the problem.
Well, your space is a great point, right? Like at some point, you physically run out of space. So do we say no at the point that the intersection can't be improved anymore? Do we vote no? And do we have the ordinances that allow us to vote no because we actually will only fail the intersection worse?
Yes.
We do.
And we have we can't approve the TIA. TIA cannot fix the situation, so they could not actually approve the TIA. And we have had that situation where there was nothing that they could do to fix that delay. It was a 1-leg left-hand turn lane that could not be mitigated, and it couldn't be improved. Therefore, it was not approved for the TIA, and it never actually happened. So it does happen. Very rare, but it does. If they can't fix it, and we can figure out a way to fix it, then we have to vote no to the TIA.
So we
If I, excuse me, go ahead, Jen.
I was just saying, so that is defendable.
So far,
Okay.
yes.
So
Because I thought from what I read somewhere in here, it said that the staff, or there's an administrative determination, if there's an administrative determination that the problem can't be mitigated, we don't even get it, right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Well, it's the flip side of that. If we get it, what discretion do we have?
That's a very good question.
I thought so.
Yeah.
That's the one that's been bothering me.
We've had that policy that we bring forward to you, ones that have been approved, that they have met the requirements of the ordinance, and therefore you can approve that. If you choose to go a different route, well, that's your determination.
A couple of quick questions.
Let's see that.
Is there a timeline in terms of that pooled money for mitigation? I mean, because my issue often comes up with, oh, well, it will be fixed, but timeline is important. If we could put some sort of timeline on, within this many months of build out, it must be addressed, or something has to trigger something else, but I've never seen that, or I don't know if that's even legal, possible. To me, I mean, that's how I plan my budget. If I have enough money to do something, then,
Yeah, we're kind of working on the assumption that something else was going to be developed in the area to help contribute to that.
And
So
in an
10
area like
years, if
this-
we don't build it in 10 years, the money has to be returned. We give the money back. So we're hoping that something can happen within the 10-year frame to actually complete this project. That is our goal.
see, that scares me even more, that we would give money back and still have a road
It's a
that's-
requirement. It's, if we can't keep holding it forever, and if we cannot achieve that number, that dollar value gathered, we have done a change now where I believe that if we get to the 80% is the tipping point. So if we are now at 80% of the collected value, that last person finishes it off. So they don't just do their portion, they complete the project. So there is a little bit of incentive to or opportunity now to be able to get it done a little bit sooner.
So then also going back to like the historically failing, or, that when something comes up for a TIA and they're already looking at an intersection that's failing, or a D or an E or whatever. Do you think that that's happening because the whole process of having a TIA started too late? I mean, how did we get here anyway? Do you know what I mean? Because if we follow what you're saying and it works, then is it because we didn't start these until, what, the 80s? Or is it because, or I mean, I really don't know.
2015, 16, 17?
I mean,
Even
So-
worse. So, I mean,
That might answer your question.
so I guess that does sort of answer my question. So is there not a way to, and I realize this does put more, I don't know what the word is, burden on those coming in now, but is there not a way to ramp up buy-in at this point? If you want to be in this type of developing area, at least until things are at a limited or positive number, you must contribute more?
well, in a way that has happened kind of in this area, there was a development that, you know, they were required to, you know, mitigate 160,000, and that was too much for them.
Yeah.
So they just kind of, it just stalled out, you know, they didn't want to go forward. So it is a limiting kind of factor as well. You know, it's a burden, and they have to evaluate that. So it, in a way, stops some development in some sense.
And I'm sure that it would, but it's a burden for everybody that lives there day to day too.
Right.
So, I mean, it is certainly a balance, you know, and one that probably, where I don't think is quite perfect yet. But, and then just because I know this area intimately, when you talk about the TIA and SCDOT and the county, there is going to be that huge development going in around the schools. That's all Fort Mill City. How does that work into the county TIA?
The apartments at Vista.
No. Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
some of that, but then all around the school.
Right. There's the apartments, I mean, Pleasant Knoll you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be the apartments, some single family, and I think some townhomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like hundreds and hundreds of
Oh,
new.
okay.
Beaver Creek.
Oh, further up, okay.
Are they contributing to this one? Are they?
Right there at Jackson Branch, I mean,
I
like
think they
right
are.
behind
I think they
Habitat.
are.
They are.
They are, yes.
So there's other ones too, and even, you know, looking all the way to the hospital. The hospital actually reaches all the way over,
Right.
and that's a contribution. So, I mean, I wasn't including all the other ones that are, I mean, it's kind of Fort Mill jurisdiction, but they actually are, you know, the TIA says they should contribute to this intersection as well.
Well, and then the new interchange, I mean, that sort of smooths out that whole
It will.
160 there, so.
It will, and I didn't really want to go down that, but yeah, the
Well, we don't have
interchange
to,
will.
it's okay.
Yeah, the interchange will it will release a lot of stress on this intersection, and there's actually a widening that actually widens down to this intersection. So there are improvements that are kind of on the way outside of, you know, the TIA mitigation.
But unfortunately, that's not always the case in the plats that we're looking at. So really the question becomes, what's that minimum level and what can we do if it comes to us when it's not looking like it's going to get addressed within what seems like a reasonable amount of time? I mean, that's how I look at it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's, again, back to the question of is it defendable? If as a planning commission, we voted no on something because it further failed the intersection and there was not any line of sight to the actual build starting, the vote no is out of safety for that area. Is that a defendable reason to vote no?
You can vote your conditions on denial. The ordinance requires you specify the reasons, and case-by-case basis, we can look at the reasonableness of those conditions, and that's what we would have to defend prospectively. So there's a basis for that. There's also a basis for approval with conditions. So the denial requires the justification in any denial of a plat, and your approval with conditions is also acceptable under the ordinance.
Diane, back to your 10 years and give money back. Being that this just started in 2015, I assume no money has been given back, right?
That's correct.
All right, secondly, is that statutory or is that a county ordinance? Where did that 10-year come from?
Michael, you familiar with what the 10 years?
The 10 years was a county imposition requirement for exacting funds from a developer and putting them to use, not to hold them indefinitely. So there becomes a point where you are taking funds and not expending them. So we did some research a couple years ago on the reasonable amount of time to keep funds, and that's where that 10-year period is derived from. I don't have that justification off the top of my head right now, Mr. Belton, but I'll be happy to provide that to you.
It's 3 years for impact fees for schools, right? So 10 years is probably very,
Yes,
allows
because
for
it's an
plenty-
anticipated construction for which there might not be a specific timeline. The impact fee is based upon a already designed or requested development for which there should be a fixed component price.
How precisely do we, I know in some developments, we have required completion of the mitigation before they can get final plat approval. That's one option, and it happens sometimes. How do we determine that? Because like in the Sanders Landing or whatever it is, we're given preliminary plat approval without,
it's a good question, it's a good question.
without condition. And we don't know, I think you did say last time how much money what their share was. Was it around $30,000 or something? I don't remember now, but anyway.
I'm sure we'll get to that, the Sanders, because I believe that's coming up, so we can kind of discuss that.
But anyway, there's sometimes apparently when they don't get final plat approval, until the improvement is completed.
Right, so in the two options, if they're required to do it, those improvements, if they have to bring it back to LOS, they're required to make those improvements before final plat. And it's kind of the same thing when we're collecting the funds as well. We need these funds before final plat. And so it's basically the same. A little different, excuse me, in commercial. Commercial's a little different, so we need that, before site plan approval.
The distinction is, the money is different from completion of the improvements, and you accept money without the requirement of final plat approval. I've read that now that I think about it, yeah.
This has been really helpful. I don't feel better about it in the sense of I have failing intersections, and this one could continue to fail for years and years and years until it ever gets fixed. At 6:45 on Monday night, I don't have a suggestion as to how to do it better, but it seems like there should be a better way, because they could fail for years. And I would like, and I'm sure that's all the way up to the state level. I'm sure that a lot of this is driven by state ordinances, but it seems like maybe we could, as a county, could find a better way to do it. Would serve our citizens better. And honestly, the businesses that open up in those spaces too. Some consumers may choose not to go to those places because of the congestion, but that's a consumer decision.
All right, let's see if I can finish up. And so, kind of just as you were discussing, Jack, as far as the impacts and when the development had to be completed, like I said, if they are required to it must be before site plan approval or final plat if they drop the LOS. And if it's a monetary, like I said, it's pretty much the same thing. Mitigation agreements are approved by county council. And as mentioned earlier, on rare occasion, when it's impossible to construct a roadway improvement or identify a transportation improvement that will eliminate the failing LOS, when this occurs, the TIA is not approved. And if the TIA is a requirement of the rezoning application, preliminary plat request, it's not brought forward to the planning commission. It almost got to the question.
Diane, something, I don't know what flexibility we have with this, but I actually would say that what we just received for the last 47 minutes, or maybe it was really like 42, was training. Like, I feel like this was valid training, how to read the TIA, how it works. And I would offer that for new planning commission members coming on, that this kind of should count toward our training hours. This is way more relevant than learning all the definitions of the different ways to manage a government or a town in South Carolina. So is there a process to create a module that maybe Chris takes new planning commission members through and it get counted as training hours?
Montreal doesn't know how lucky he is to be.
If we get it counted, you're really lucky.
Right. Yeah, as far as being to kind of count towards it from what's already taken now to go to the future for Montreal's benefit or anybody else in the commission, they do allow you to, as planners who are approved planners, we can do our own training sessions. So if we want to take the time to go ahead and build something like that and then get them approved by Association of Counties, then we can utilize that as training. So when I worked for the town of Fort Mill, we did our own training. And so we brought in people to speak and all kinds of stuff to be able to more relevant topics outside of our planning commission evening meetings. And so that you can do that if they're approved by the commission, by state, county, or county.
Yeah, I would put forward
So-
that kind of, the whole thing you just gave with the examples and everything would be an excellent form of training that actually equips us to do our job better. Mm-hmm. I'd also go through all the ordinances too, but we can talk about them another day. But I just think this is relevant and helps us actually do our job better.
Jimmy, may I ask him one more question, and then we'll get the business of the added the congestion added by a particular project. Is it simply a matter of calculating the additional trips or cars per day, per time period, above what the existing cars per day or trips per day is, AM and PM, and then taking that number of additional trips and making it a percentage of the total traffic volume?
Right. Correct.
Okay.
And that is predicted on what? Because it's a predicted project. So what do you look at? The square footage of the development, how large the development is?
So the IT manual is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. There's a manual that they have where they collect all of this data for various developments and residential. When they do this, they do an update every so many years. And they have a formula for businesses based off of square footage, a number of different ways to calculate it. And so you basically take that formula and they will, based off, like I said, square footage, you will calculate how many trips that use is expected to generate.
And last question, I assume it's different for residential versus retail versus
Correct.
industry, et cetera.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a thick book,
And isn't the goal to calculate the actual delay? Isn't that what we're trying to get to, is what's the delay of moving through that intersection? So I'm gonna go ahead and take control here. It is on. Yeah. I'll just speak into it. How about? I think the screen here, does this show you how the delay was increased?
It looks at the delay, but not the, we'll actually kind of do the increase in delay. So they'll show you kind of a delay, but there's another calculation that we do.
Okay.
But if you just want to see the delay, you can see that there's a 2.2 increase in delay from the no build and the build.
2.2 plus.
Seconds.
2.2 second delay. Sorry.
Second.
Yeah.
Per car?
Right. Correct.
And I guess the thought there that is every time you have to delay is you then might make a movement into traffic that's not safe. So the longer that delay is, the more likely the driver will then make a movement that's unsafe. So that's what they're trying to avoid, is that unsafe movement.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to Sanders Landing.
Yeah, I'll be back. You know where to find me.
All right, good evening. This is Sanders Landing again. Tax map numbers 359-0000-018 and 357-0000-051. May Green Properties, they are developing a property off of Holly Road area, and it is to the west of Filbert Highway and Holly Road. And it is going to be, let's see, 33 lots. This is phase 4. They have paid into the TIA for the previous phases. So the number you see for on the TIA there is just for this phase. Let me see. Looks like it's low density, no sidewalks required, and it is a total of 35.2 acres of open space in addition to residential, which was, so the total area is 90.05 acres. You have any questions for staff?
Help me out. Thank you. Help me out trying to read it fast. So, okay, so taking my learnings from Chris's presentation. So one lane's an F, 2 are A's, and 1 is a B, right? And that it previously was 3 A's and a B? Am I reading that correctly?
Let's see here.
Oh, no, I'm not reading it correctly.
No, the F was an E that goes to an F.
And the
I was looking at-
F in the AM, there's also a crossing guard there. Because it's right by a school.
Where did you see that E? I'm sorry.
The Lawrence Road Lane Elementary.
Yeah, so this is from no build to build, so it's an LOSF currently.
Oh, I see. Thank you so much.
E. In the PM goes to an LOS. Maybe just from the no build to build.
24.
Four, yeah.
Eastbound and more.
Quick question about the money. So on packet page 18. So is it correct then that there's 48,300 left that needs to be paid into the pot?
For final plat, this is preliminary plat, so they haven't final platted the entire neighborhood yet, so we don't have all the money yet.
Right, but they're not paying 100%, correct? That's the
Correct,
problem?
no.
So then is there will there be an additional outstanding almost 50,000 that's not covered?
There is a neighborhood directly to the north of it, Magnolia, that has also been paying into the TIF. I cannot get it to go back one for the vicinity map.
Correct, and Magnolia contributed 31,000 to this improvement.
So if you look at the vicinity map there directly to the left, Star Magnolia,
Okay,
that was a different, that just came in 2 months ago? I think it was 2 months ago. And they also paid into the same intersection,
at 31,000.
correct?
In addition to the 19.7 that this one would need to pay in now,
Right,
And
that's
the-
for this phase,
and the 47,000 that they paid in previously.
correct?
So then doesn't that push somebody over the 80%?
No, so the 80%
close?
was if they increased the delay, if they were, there was 80% on them, then they would have been required to do the improvement, full out. But it's, they've paid almost 100%. When you look at it, it's a total of, I think it's 90-some
Yeah. about 90.
thousand, so it's,
Right.
they pretty much almost complete the improvement.
but it's still not there. So I guess I misunderstood then. I thought you said earlier that if there was 80 or 20% left, that whoever paid up to that 80% had to kick in the rest. Did I misunderstand that?
That's correct, but we're not at that 80% yet.
Guess that's my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when it goes from F to F, and the recommendation is to improvement is to install a traffic light, does the traffic light make it better than an F in the AM? Or is it, even with the traffic light, it stays an F?
So as I noted a little further down, that there will, if the traffic light is installed, there will be I believe it was a 74% improvement. So it basically completely mitigates and some the delay. And also the delay was on one leg. So when you look at the overall leg, if you have one failing leg, but in totality, it's probably operating at a LOSB.
Probably, yeah. And what would be our best estimation as to when the stoplight would be put in?
It would require another development to go in the same area.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I'm sorry?
When would it go in?
We don't currently have plans for additional development out there.
Correct. There's no other plans.
That's why I asked that question.
So, can I go to my question then? Let's say hypothetically, another development doesn't go in for the next 10 years, then would you be refunding back all this money and we'll still be at an F and no traffic signal would go in?
Right, so yes.
But out there, it's not really reasonable to think that another development's not going to go in the next 10 years.
It's a very popular area,
Yes.
and there's plenty of land available.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Do we have any further questions of staff?
Chris, I want to make sure that I understand the answer to your question. You said it's an F right now without bill, F with bill, but install the traffic signal, recommended improvement, and I'm not sure I quite got your answer. Does that change that F then to the B, or are you just assuming it would be operating as a B?
So it's just calculated the improvement. I think it goes, because the other legs I believe are operating. Was it at an A? And it was just a one leg. Let me see. System
Well, season,
eastbound is F. A, C. Yeah, so the traffic light, it'll be operating at LOSA with the traffic light improvement.
That leg,
The entire intersection.
the overall rate.
Right. Correct.
Am I reading this right? The existing condition, the eastbound leg is F in the morning, D in the evening. Build out, the eastbound leg is still going to be F in the morning and F in the evening when we get
Right.
done, and that's with the improvements.
No, that's without the
that's
improvement.
without.
That's just showing you,
Lord have mercy.
that's without.
Yeah, the top of page 18, that first paragraph,
Yes, ma'am.
it mentions that the installation of the traffic light is expected to reduce the delay by 73% in the
I
eastbound
see that.
movement,
I see that.
which fully mitigates the development's impacts.
Yeah.
Then you probably have enough money right now to do, didn't they say like a stop sign would help, but they felt that the stop light
was-
would be a better
It was a right turn lane.
right turn lane, that's what it was.
But the traffic light with
this-
the greater improvement.
Right. So I would assume if, say, 10 years down the road, you're getting ready to return the money, no other development has come in, you'd put in that turn lane with the money and then return the rest instead of the light, because the light at that point wouldn't be needed. Is that a reasonable assumption?
And that is reasonable.
Well, except for with the build out, it makes the intersection a F in the morning, or makes that leg an F in the morning and the afternoon. So those 10 years, you still got an F situation.
But remember, that's just the leg, so it's not the overall intersection. The overall intersection is probably operating at a B. So it's just the leg. So
Yeah.
we kind of look at the leg so we can kind of get all of the, make sure that the developer is mitigating his impact. So overall, and like I said, there's a stop guard in the morning, and so it's kind of already operating almost at a LOSA, but you really can't calculate that. Maybe the stop guard's not there, in the future.
Also, just for the area here, the leg we're talking about is if you follow Lawrence Road, which is on that aerial towards the top, that continues northeastern towards Filbert Highway 321. So the problem is when somebody gets to that intersection of Lawrence and 321, they can't make that left-hand turn. And there's a school right there, which that's why the morning is causing a problem, because that school traffic is causing that problem. Traffic guard is there in the morning and probably in the evening as well, kind of help alleviate some of that. And I don't believe that school guard is reflected in these numbers to show how that helps the situation, having that
That's
traffic guard
correct.
right there.
It is or is not?
Is not.
It is not.
So the reality with the traffic guard there, it's functioning
Correct.
properly right now. You put in the light, the school no longer has to pay the traffic guard, have a traffic guard there. But at the moment, unfortunately, the TIA doesn't reflect the actual situation on the ground, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Thank you.
And the traffic guard, so 5 o'clock in the afternoon when school is not in session, how is it functioning at that point when obviously there's no traffic guard there?
Right, and so you would then just kind of look at like I said, the problem is in the morning, and so in the evening it's not a problem.
It's gonna be with build out, right? It's gonna go to it will be a problem in the PM as well with the build out.
What are the hours for the PM?
According to the sheet here, in the PM, it would be an
Correct.
F.
That's correct. Yeah.
Chris, what are the hours of PM?
What are the PM hours? So it's
4 to 7 or?
yeah, it's 4 to 4. I think it's 4:30 to 7:30, I believe, for the PM peak.
I promise I'm not trying to be difficult, but here's like what I fear happens, right? So the next development comes in, and it would more than enough finish out the stoplight, and we could put a stoplight there. But let's say that it's actually pretty significant, and it makes the stoplight no longer mitigated. Now we need a lane and a stoplight. So then we're kind of reset because now we're pooling more funds to build the intersection. So it feels like we never get to building the intersection or doing the corrections to the intersection because we're still pooling funds, and the meanwhile it stayed in F.
That next development would also have to do a TIA, their own TIA showing, and that would be for if it shows in the TIA they need both, they would have to put in the percentage for both. If not, the entire, depending on where we are on funding.
Would we go ahead and put in the stoplight if it said it now needs a stoplight and 2 turn lanes?
I'm not sure where the trigger is on, once we have the money for a stoplight, if we need more.
I'll add this too, as far as the turn lane. If we determine that turn lane is needed, engineering also reviews the TA as well. And so Patrick Hamilton with Penny for Progress, he says that if need be, it could be done in-house. So we would save cost if we elect to go with the turn lane. And so we may have, might not need really much more if it is done in-house.
Do we have any further questions of staff? Do we have a motion? Being that it's a preliminary plat, it meets all of the county requirements. I make a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
We got a debate.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any further discussion? We had such a long discussion beforehand. Any further discussion?
So I'm just to get my head, this might be thinking out loud and I apologize in advance. So approving this, we sort of approve there to degrade the intersection in the evening, knowing that, and not really knowing when it will get better, but because what we know about the intersection, it's likely to have another development and that will finish the funding.
Right. And looking at the example he gave, like the Paddler's Cove example, the improvement that Paddler's Cove paid for the whole thing on that particular one improved traffic there immensely. It was a huge change from before development to after development. Because I turn left out of Autumn Cove regularly, and it was a nightmare before that light was put in. So, I mean, it way more than mitigated.
To be sure I understand that the paragraph at the top of page 18 is saying what? With regard
Chris,
to the mitigation.
I think that is directed towards you.
Well, it's just to know it was directed up anywhere.
I don't have my pages numbered, so I'm not sure exactly which page.
That's the one where it talks about a 73%
Yeah, it's got-
improvement
Okay.
Yeah, it's got the
on the
73.
eastbound. Elementary and Filbert Highway was needed to mitigate the impacts of the development. Right turn lane improvement will reduce the delay,
Right.
is the top paragraph on that.
Okay.
But
So my interpretation,
sorry.
oh, go ahead.
it will reduce the delay by 73%, but when we get, what will that do to, oh, hold on a second, I'm sorry. That will improve that particular leg to what level of service?
It's the overall intersection. We'll go to an A.
And that particular intersection is
Because remember, that was just,
away from the others that you've analyzed. This is the one intersection at the school.
right. This is the main intersection that we're talking about as far as improvement. And so, I think you've kind of been
Okay.
focusing on the leg that was failing, but like I said, the other legs weren't failing. And so, the reduction in 73% fully mitigates it to an A. So the entire intersection, all functions, all legs, an A.
Is that expressed somewhere that I'm not seeing?
I didn't word it maybe that way, but that's kind of what's happening.
It would be helpful, I think, maybe in the future, if
Sure.
if we make that projection and put it down here,
Sure.
this will make it,
Sure.
this leg of the intersection.
Right, and sometimes the TIA doesn't actually give me that, so I have to kind of,
Okay,
I
I
have to
got
do
it.
it that way.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, looks unanimous. On to new business, review and provide recommendations on the small area plan. Oh. Yes, sir? Yes, quickly, thank you. State your name and address for the record. You're the developer, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So Tom Smith, Green Properties, 938 Timber Creek Drive, York, South Carolina. We like to see the money spent as soon as possible to help the people that we sell to and market our developments. We're a low-impact development company. We've been developing for 30 years in this area, and we do a good job. We supply a lot of jobs for local builders. We don't mass grade. We do a lot of green space, so we do quality developments. And the traffic study is just part of growth, and realize that. But when you're asking when this money's spent, all we're doing is given the criteria that they've given us, and we are doing our due diligence and then forwarding it to you folks. So that's all we've been asked. we have no control of when that money's gonna be spent either. I would love to see the light spent and put there. I don't like giving out $90,000 and just letting it sit there. You guys can have it. I'll write something and it won't have to come back in 10 years. I don't care, it's gone. Hopefully I'll be retired in 10 years, or maybe a little bit longer. But I'm just telling you, so we're on the same page, but when it goes to DOT and what they do with the money and the funding and the projections of growth, so it's a tough job, and I wanna say thank you for serving, first of all, and appreciate your time and your effort. But we're with you, we're on the same page. Sometimes I feel like, oh, developers just give money and they're just off the hook. Well, that's, we've been doing it for 30 years before there was any growth in the area, okay? And traffic studies is just another element that has come in, but we also do a lot of things now that impact what we do. And quite frankly, we're about one of the only developers doing low impact in the county left, because it's tough to do it. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for the information. Okay.
There we go. Okay, so this evening we're going to finish up with the residential design standards for all kinds of residential uses in the Lake Wiley Overlay District. So just a little bit of background. As you remember, the Lake Wiley Small Area Plan was adopted in October, and included in that plan was a visual preference survey that was completed at a public meeting for us to gauge support on various elements related to residential design. So what we're bringing to you now is something that we believe that the public in that area would support. We did have a strong level of support for residential design standards in general as a result of that visual preference survey. So this amendment is going to be implementation of at least that portion of the Lake Wiley Small Area Plan. So what I'm going to do is go through single-family detached, single-family attached, multifamily, and then accessory structures. And I'm thinking maybe the best way for us to do this is to go by each use and have questions after I summarize each use, so that we don't get confused with what particular residential type we're talking about. So if you just bear with me with the summary, and then I'll get to your questions, okay? So single family detached. So what I'm gonna highlight is the kind of the spirit of what we're trying to do. The specifics will be in the ordinance in front of you. So the applicability of this is gonna be within major subdivisions on lots that are less than 1 acre and are set back less than 50 feet from the right of way. So that covers the large subdivisions. That excludes the larger lot developments that are kind of scattered through this part of the county, or the lot here or there on some random road. The subdivisions that have preliminary plats that are already approved are exempt from the development standards that would have to be altered for a plat. However, they're still on the hook for the design standards for the homes themselves, which had not yet been permitted. The existing parcel-specific zoning conditions, such as those in a development agreement or a planned development, where they say, here are designed for this particular development, they will carry where they conflict with the new language. So onto kind of the spirit of what we're doing here, we're going to reduce the front setbacks to allow the living area to be closer to the street, while still providing room for you to park in front of your garage. So the setback is going to be reduced, but for the garage, the setback is going to be greater than the living area. So you're going to be able to park your car. You're going to have room to park your car in front of your garage, but your living area will be in front of that. So the result will be a recessed front-loaded garage. So we're going to encourage pedestrian paths and gathering places within the development. We're going to restrict the block length so that you have more, roads and places for you. If you're walking down the sidewalk and want to get from one place to another, you have more than one option to do that. If you're trying to go to an open space, you have a shorter route because the blocks aren't as long. We want to spread open space throughout the subdivision, and we want the houses to front the open space. So you have, kind of the eyes on the street concept where the houses are overlooking the open space and kind of keeping people safe because you got all these, potential windows looking at you. So the appearance of the homes, we have several requirements for the facade materials, how those materials can be applied, whether they're inset or kind of extended on the side, what kinds of materials, also the projection and recesses with the front porch. We don't want a flat base. We want the house to have some kind of articulation on the front, make it a little bit more interesting. We want the house to have a raised foundation, make it more prominent instead of your, just slab on grade, kind of a squatty look. Among other items, there's a lot of different standards in there. And another important thing is we want to reduce the visual impact of the vehicle use areas along the front of the home through the garage design standards and through the driveway standards. So we want the garages not to be the primary feature of the front of the home. So we don't want them to be protruding. We don't want them to be, where you have a 2-car garage and then the entrance is kind of hidden behind a garage door. We don't want that. And the public didn't want that either in the visual preference survey. Driveway standards, that's another thing where we don't want the driveway to take up the entire front of the residential of a residential home. We want there to be, area for grass and landscaping and planters and things like that instead of a, 24-foot driveway that just swallows the front of the house, front yard. So here's some examples. These came directly from the visual preference survey. So the smiley faces are what we like to see. A mix of facade materials. We're not going to be requiring a particular mix, but we are saying no vinyl siding, no metal siding, limited stucco. Deep front porch, minimum 6 feet front porch depth, because when you have a front porch, it's nice to be able to stretch your legs out, put some furniture out, have it actually useful instead of kind of there more for looks. Recessed garage, we don't want, like I said before, don't want the garage to be a prominent feature. As this home is here, you can see the garage is much, I would say 30-40% of the whole width of the home, and then the garage is also recessed, so it's not dominant. We want the living area to dominate the facade, so we have a side-loaded garage here. They've got the windows, make it look like living space. The garage is not protruding, or at least not very much. So it has a nice appearance as far as the residential living goes. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. Any questions on this part?
Yeah. Actually, it's more of an overall kind of question. Why is it only being applied in Lake Wylie and not countywide? Because the sense I'm going to get from this is that if this is only applied in Lake Wylie, nobody's going to do anything in Lake Wylie till if they can go somewhere else and do it.
Well, first of all, the Lake Wylie Small Area Plan, we got the support from the public within that particular area for these residential design standards. And our thought is, why not test them in the Lake Wylie area and then see if we can take them countywide once they've been proven? So we have a aspiration to make them countywide, but we're not there yet.
And there are parts of the county that it wouldn't be appropriate for. Some of the more rural areas, you have areas where.
Correct, and that's areas that, but if you're talking areas up in Fort Mill and you know, over on the eastern side of the county that this could apply to right now. And if somebody's looking to develop, why would they want to do this when they have, which is going to be just that much more to do in a development where they can go somewhere else? And I think it would push development away. If that's, I mean, and if that's the intent, that's fine. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think we would like to move in that direction of making it countywide. We're just not quite there yet.
In your desire to potentially move of countywide, what does this do to home ownership and affordability of home ownership?
Well, I would agree with you that these design standards will raise some of the costs of housing because you have to add some, small elements here and there. But when you talk about the garage, for example, it's really just adjusting the layout of the houses. So a garage will be pushed back instead of pulled forward. I mean, certainly there's some expense in, redoing those home plans or, making new home plans, and that will be, sent along to the buyers, but, it's a cost of business. And in this Lake Wiley area, these particular developments, these houses are not affordable homes anyway. So it's, sure, it's going to add to the expense, but these are not meant to be affordable homes at the current time. So, and there is affordability in the western part of the county as well, because there's not as much demand in that area.
And I agree with you on that these are not intended for my idea what affordable is, but what I guess I was just commenting or asking the question based on the point you made that there's intention on doing this all over the county. So if this, at some point, if it's applied all over the county, then that means no homes in the county would be affordable then,
No,
correct?
actually what that would mean is homes that are built within large single-family subdivisions would have to worry about these requirements. So this does not affect every single home that's built in the county in the future if we've moved in that direction.
To me, these seem like HOA, CCR standards. Why does the county want to take this on? I mean, why?
What's the government involved in it?
It seems, I was gonna say, it seems like a bit of overreach, to be quite honest.
Yeah, why is the government involved in this, creating standards for how people build and what people buy?
I'm all for standards. And I love what we do in zoning in terms of setback and in terms of buffer and in terms of those things that truly can be detrimental to your neighbor if they aren't followed. But I already know that we don't necessarily follow all of the standards that we put on a subdivision. So I wonder what does this accomplish for us as a county, and who enforces this? Who enforces this?
You kind of moved. I thought you were going to say something.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I was preparing myself because I needed to. I took off my mask.
Just
Sorry,
checking.
but you got it.
I'll try it, and then
You got
can back me up if you need to. I just lost my train of thought.
Why and who?
Huh?
Why are we doing this, and who's
Why
going
are
to
we doing
enforce
this?
it?
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I understand. I'm sorry. I just
Well, let me speak to the HOA part.
Okay.
Okay. So the entity that puts together the HOA is typically the home builder.
Mm-hmm.
So they put it together to their advantage. So what we're doing is we're saying we're putting these standards in because we want these neighborhoods to be more focused on the pedestrian, the people that are walking in the neighborhood, the people that are going to an open space. We want this not to be the neighborhood that you drive in and all you see are garages. It's not designed around your car. It's designed for you to come in and live and to enjoy your neighborhood. You come in, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's go to the park that's in the neighborhood. Let's go to the, whatever open space that's in the neighborhood. It's really built to kind of enhance the community.
But I think that our zoning does that, what we've been talking about the last few times, in terms of, like we talked about last month. I almost said last week. It's just been a month. But when you talk about how the house looks, when you talk about that there has to be lattice between the pillars. When you talk, I mean, to me, and again, maybe it is just me, but that seems a little bit like overreach as opposed to something that the market would drive and someone would choose to purchase that house as opposed to maybe one with a lesser facade.
I mean, the way that the market is these days, it's, most of you know, it's a hot market. And so what's available, you're forced to buy what's available. What they build, you buy. There are no other options. So, and what they build is obviously based on cost. And a lot of these elements that we're talking about are things that they really would rather not put in. So we're trying to move in that direction. There are other jurisdictions, like Rock Hill, for example. We got a lot of these, at least some of the wording and ideas from Rock Hill. So this is going to bring a consistency with the city of Rock Hill and how they design their residential properties as well. So we're not the only ones, even in the county, moving in this direction.
But we're not even doing anything over there because this only applies to Lake Wiley.
I'm sorry, what?
But this doesn't apply to areas around Rock Hill right now. This
Well,
only applies.
that's true, but if we went countywide, then there would be more of a consistency between the city's properties and the county's properties.
It's an if.
So
Why don't we just do it?
I'm not against it, but I'm not the one making these decisions, so.
I have some other questions that in here it says that you can have no more than 3 garage doors facing the street.
Right, and that has to do with the garage dominance.
Which is, and that's fine, but then it says you can't have any wider than a 20-foot driveway.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get 3 cars? How do you get a 3-car garage and a 20-foot driveway to work?
So the way that I think about the only way it could work is you have a side-loaded 2-car garage, and then you have
But that's
the
not
third
what it says. It
setback.
says front-loaded.
Right. We're trying
So
to
if you have a
limit
front-loaded,
the
if you have a
3-car
front-loaded
loads.
3-car garage,
Mhm.
you can't. I mean, you need more than a 20-foot driveway.
You talking pad?
But
They don't say pad, you're right, they say driveway.
there's no clarification in that. So it says a maximum of 3 garage doors may front the street for each dwelling. However, one must be at least recessed 15 feet behind the primary facade. It's fine. I'm not debating that. But how do you do that with a 20-foot driveway? It can't be done. So I think that needs to be corrected some way in order for us to move forward with this. And you also talk about moving the homes up closer toward the street, which I understand. So that would be, even with the garage sitting behind it, you're still gonna probably have less driveway.
You mean less driveway length?
Yeah. So, because we're not having 24-foot anymore, we only have 20, so
Right.
we could potentially have less cars parked in the driveway, which means more on the street. Is this intending to increase street standards to have more on-street parking?
Not for houses that are built with lots over 60 feet width, which is kind of the next part of what I'll get to.
Say that again, please.
So I haven't gotten into it yet, but what we're moving towards is requiring, if your lot is let me say this, if it's less than 60 feet wide, is requiring rear-loaded, alley-loaded garages. So, and that would have a requirement for the on-street parking.
I don't want to interrupt you, go ahead.
No, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
You said something a second ago about a house that was more than, somebody's a 60-foot wide
Yeah, I
house.
haven't gotten to this section yet. I will
Lot.
explain it.
I'm conceptually, philosophically, and I'm thinking about what Montreo said, how small a house can you build and fit it within these requirements?
Into which requirements?
The ones you just went over?
Because we got different kinds of lots that we're talking about.
I'm not talking about the lots. I'm talking about affordable housing. How small a house can you build and apply these design standards? Now, I know you can't answer that, but it seems to me that when you, there's a point where where the ability to meet these design standards dictates that a house can't be any smaller than blank.
Or any less cost than blank.
Or any less cost than blank,
Because
yes.
of outdoor living.
Exactly.
A raised foundation.
And I do have a problem with that. I mean, you know, what is it? Well, I have a problem with that. To the extent that these requirements eliminate a certain new home buyer market because of the design standards, it seems like we're going down a, I like the design standards, but I think we have to give consideration to who are we excluding from the process. That's my philosophical
Being the lake,
problem.
I can understand that going countywide with it.
Yeah.
And in the Lake Wiley area, I mean, this is just the Lake Wiley small area plan. They're really not building anything under 300,000 new right now. Paddler's Cove is $500,000 pretty consistently. So these design standards aren't going to be a big percentage change on those homes. And then there's still plenty of townhomes going, and there are a lot of townhomes going in Lake Wiley, condos, apartments, things like that.
I don't disagree with that.
And I want to mention to you, there are no requirements that you have to have a garage. There are no minimum square footage requirements.
Okay, well, that's a good point. There's
Yeah,
no
I mean, you
requirement
can
for a
build
garage
them,
at all?
You know, build them small and build them nice. That's what we're essentially asking. I'm saying they can build them small. We're just saying we want them to have these particular, features on the exterior.
Well, you
They
just
can
said you
build
don't
them
have to have a
small.
garage. Is that
Yeah,
true?
there is no garage requirement. We're saying if you have a garage, it must be like this. But
All
we
right.
don't require
Oh,
a
that's
garage.
a good point.
And we don't require a 2-car garage, a 1-car garage, we leave all that flexibility. We're just saying, if you have a garage, we don't want it to dominate the front of the home. We say, you can have a garage, say, you've seen these neighborhoods where you have a house in the front and the garage is way down at the end of the driveway.
Sure.
Detached.
Sure.
We want that.
I get that.
So we want that flexibility. It's just the market these days likes to provide a dominant front-loaded 2- or 3-car garage.
I just think that council ought to consider whether the design standards impose a limitation on the ability of new home buyers to buy a house. That's my philosophical thing. I have a technical question.
Well, you could be a new home buyer and buy a house on, just one of the, you see all these all the time where you have a road, just some random county road, and they're splitting up the lots and building new houses on them. This doesn't affect that.
Yeah, but you can't do it in a subdivision, according to this.
Right. Not in a large, your typical large.
Well, what's the definition of a subdivision? How many lots?
Was it 7 or 8?
6 and higher.
The seventh lot is the.
7th lot makes a subdivision.
I'm sorry,
The 7th lot,
seventh lot
Seventh.
is a subdivision.
And what defines a large subdivision then? Because you've used that adjective large. What is a large
I guess I'm
subdivision?
just thinking that's the way that they typically build them. We're talking hundreds of lots.
My question goes back to something we discussed last month, which, what zoning category would the less than 60-foot wide lots apply to?
It applies to any zoning, well, we don't go by zoning category here. It's gonna, but this is gonna be in the RCs and RDs, most likely RDs. Because
Those-
you're excluding the 1 acre lots, which is
Yeah.
gonna be RUD, so it's not going to affect those.
Correct.
The exclusions of those are gonna push it outside of the RUD. It's gonna be more in the RUC1, maybe RDs, most likely RDs.
But none of those, I mean, the RCs were greater than 60 foot, correct? So this is really just, I mean, we don't,
No, the
my question
RCs
is,
can go smaller than that if they choose to. It's all about, it can go.
but we're getting rid of the incentives. So you keep, don't you get rid of
Well,
the,
there's that, well, yes.
so that you get rid of the frontage incentive? Because wasn't it part of the incentive to get the smaller lot size, the smaller?
We didn't change the lot widths on that at all. The same lot widths for the open space changes for the cluster subdivisions. Yeah, that was not changed for the lot widths.
Okay, so then this would basically only apply to cluster subdivisions.
It would apply to if it meets any of the categories that are part of what this applies to.
Okay,
So
so.
if it meets all
so-
those categories, then it would.
So the new zoning changes that we discussed last month, where we have 10, 20, 30, 40,000 square foot lots. What are those lot widths?
They can be as low as, the code can go down to 40, but that's probably not gonna happen. Typically, they're 60s, 70s. We did not change the requirement of the lot widths
Okay,
in that code.
that's what I need to know, okay.
So when we think about this for the Lake Wiley overlay, right this moment, I think I can be supportive of it because of what's already happened in that area and how that's already set up and what's already for sale. But I couldn't vote yes if it by any means gave the green light to moving to a county level. And my concern being, we're adding the cost is changing the supply and demand model. And we're not allowing consumer choice to select how things get built. Some of it I agree with, but adding certain types of facade, raising the foundation, like there are people who need a neighborhood that doesn't have the additional cost of a raised foundation. It's safe without, I might choose all of these. I kind of like them, but that's my choice. And by requiring everyone to meet these standards, rules out a certain set of homeowners that I'm certainly not comfortable as a county not allowing an opportunity for. And then second, I think it takes away consumer choice. So if I vote yes and it in any way creates a go ahead for the whole county, I would have to vote no for that reason. If we are just making a decision about Lake Wiley and there's a full review at any kind of county level, I could potentially support it. I just am very concerned about the potential implication that it puts on what York County welcomes and doesn't welcome in our county.
My frustration and why I brought the questions up initially is because on packet page 25 in the, why the council said that they voted for this was, quote, public health, safety, and general welfare. To me, this doesn't apply to that. Walkability, all of those things that you mentioned, absolutely does. That I get. Green space, open space, how you access that, who has access to that, that does. This small aspect of this, or large but seemingly other aspect, doesn't jive.
You saying this, are we talking about this 60 feet wide?
No, just the
I'm not sure.
the facade, again, the raised foundation, because
Outdoor living space.
outdoor living space, the things that, again, make for a much posher house, but also a much more expensive house. And again, like you pointed out, with the need for the bump outs and the recess and the, is probably going to make for a larger house as well. And I think, again, that could alienate buyers. I get that Lake Wiley already is at a price point.
There are a lot of existing homes that are below that price point.
Right.
Also.
Well,
It's just,
just
and
like
the
Fort
new
Mill.
construction's already at that, we're already there.
Right.
In Lake Wiley. You're between 300 and you know, if you're on the water, $1 million homes.
Sure.
But I would say the average in Lake Wiley is probably around 400 on the new construction. It's already there.
No, I understand. Believe me, Fort Mill
Yeah.
is as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it is there.
Right. But the existing homes are not.
But I just
Yeah, they're all-
question if I personally question if that's the point of government, to
Right.
legislate that. So that's probably where I would,
Say that again, please.
I
Kate.
just question if that's the point of the county to legislate those parts of, you know, of a neighborhood. I like the zoning aspect of things, obviously. I think that's important. I think that buffers are important. I think that walkability is important. I think that connectivity is important. I think we're going out of scope when you get to other things. And then I do worry a little bit about the Raise Foundation, and I do see that it said there was an exemption for those over 55.
Yes.
But does it take into account disabled or multi-generational families? We have a huge influx of multi-generational in Fort Mill. I don't know if Lake Wiley sees that as well, but those are considerations too that I don't necessarily, might not have been addressed. So those, I see a problem with that.
Excuse me.
No, go ahead. I don't want to belabor the point, but I think Jack made my points very well. Jennifer certainly made my point, and thank you. What's your name?
Kate.
Kate absolutely made my point. I'm not going to use the word believe. I just do not think that is the role of government to get down into the areas we're getting to, and affordability does become an issue. This should absolutely be consumer driven. So I guess I do want to ask, by a vote on this, does this anyway imply anything moving forward for the rest of the county, or is this just specific for?
This is specifically for Lake Wiley.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it said the Lake Wiley Overlay District.
Yes, as defined.
Which,
in
what is
ordinance.
what's the back boundary that goes behind that?
Kingsbury, I
Kingsbury
guess?
Road?
Yeah, it
Kingsbury.
follows the Parham Road, Kingsbury, Oak Ridge
Yeah, it's actually before Parham. It's Kingsbury.
to Kingsbury.
Yeah.
It's part of Parham as well. Parham south of 49.
Okay. And then it
That's-
bumps into Kingsbury and then.
Yeah,
up
kind
over.
of goes up Parham over there and up like that.
I'm trying to remember, we looked at that plat in connection with something we did a few months ago.
Commercial regions, or the nodes, was when we talked about, nodes of business development.
What are they?
The sections with the mixed use.
Yeah.
So as drawn, it's limited to the Lake Wiley, not just the Lake Wiley area, because who knows what that is?
It's the Lake
but
Wiley
Lake
Small
Wiley
Area Plan
Overlay
boundaries.
District.
Yeah,
And those boundaries, as they currently exist.
yes.
Okay, now I have a more detailed question. Where did we get the notion for having alleys and alleys? If you look at plats of the old Rock Hill Land and Town Site Company, I'm the only one old enough to have done that here. Alleys have been a part of, they were part of the original layout of Rock Hill. They became a problem when services are no longer provided through alleys, and there have been numbers of closings of the alleys and stuff like that, just so people are not stuck with an alley in the city of Rock Hill. And as I read the design standards, and I'm not against alleys, that's okay. I just think we need to go and need to know where that's headed. As I understand it, the proposal, the proposed ordinance requires that there be an HOA or some similar organization that will be responsible for keeping and maintaining the alley. That's an enormous expense, and they got to be paved, right? It's like
Wouldn't
having
the alleys have to be at county standards and be maintained by the county like the road?
No,
No, they'll be
it's
private.
HOA.
Those are private?
Yeah,
Yeah, it says in here that they're not gonna be
County Manager.
If you're familiar with the Fort Mill area, consider Braden, where those are alleys, those are private roads maintained by the HOA.
For now. I'm maybe I've just been in the business I was in too long. I've just seen too many HOA problems down the road. Because somebody's got to pay for all that. And then you wind up with enormous assessments, a lot of which will be related to those kinds of maintenance items. And then you wind up with people not being able to pay the assessments or just saying, I don't like that, I'm not going to pay the assessments. And it's a neat idea, but I think it's fraught with problems down the road. If you have it owned and maintained by some sort of homeowners organization. That's all I got to say about that.
So the concept behind the alleys, I know you mentioned Rock Hill.
Yeah.
The whole idea here with what we're trying to do, if you think of Baxter Village, we're trying to go in that more traditional direction, where you have the homes with the front porches and you have the sidewalks with the trees and the parks and the open space. It's a really kind of a special place. You don't get a lot of that in the market today. It's not provided very often. So we're trying to move in that direction, and you can have a traditionally designed home that, you talk about affordability, and I understand what you're saying.
Baxter ain't a good example of that.
Well, you can, what I'm getting at is you can have a traditionally designed home going with these standards. We don't require that the house be all brick or all stone, or it doesn't have to have that at all. We're requiring more of the layout of the house. And so you can, as long as you alter the layout of the house, you can have, the fiber siding, and you can have a fairly basic house and still meet the design standards. It's just the house is laid out differently than your typical conventional single-family subdivision home. So I know when you look at this, you think a lot of the stuff that would be in Lake Wiley, which is expensive. And it will continue to be expensive, but I believe these standards here, with some, some good architectural, a little bit of design knowledge, you can make a fairly simple layout that's not going to be terribly expensive. Because, like I said, we're not requiring that they put a garage with the home. They could put a driveway there. That's fine. We're not requiring it's all brick. We're not, putting terrible design standards on here that are so expensive. A raised foundation, they built that, 50 years ago. You just put the brick up there and you just put the wood and you just start building the frame house. They do that, they still do that. That's, I wouldn't say that that's taking it and making it so expensive. It's kind of bringing it back to how they used to build it. So, anyway, I want to move on because we have other elements.
You talk about how it's not raising costs, but so one of the concerns I have is we're not providing enough parking on the properties now, and then it's all going to spill over to the street. And you even say here it creates on-street parking requirements, which means wider streets, it's more expensive infrastructure. So, all of that goes back to the price. Mm-hmm. It's not built in a vacuum like that. The house may be a simpler design that may not cost as much, in your opinion, but the other elements of it all go back to that same point. It's all gonna go into the cost of the house in the end. Mm-hmm. The wider streets cost more, which means the lots cost more, which means the houses are gonna cost more.
Did I understand? I heard something about an exemption for 55 and older.
Yeah, that is in the language here. If they state that in the covenants, conditions, and the CCRs for the neighborhood, then they would be exempt from the raised foundation requirement.
So, but how is that applied? Because I was looking at these provisions would be mostly for developers, right? Because they're the ones making subdivisions, and this is what this
The developers write
applies.
these CCRs before they build the homes.
I see,
So
so it'd
during
be
the
like
planning
if the
process, it's
person who
all
bought the
worked out.
lot and they're building the house for is over 55, then it doesn't have to be a raised foundation, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is, so the developer, developer says, you know what, we're gonna build a 55 and over subdivision. So they commit to that by writing these CCRs before any of the homes are built.
I see, it has to apply to the entire subdivision.
Right.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay. So, let me move on, this is a real short section here, the traditional
Can I ask you,
development
let me
standards.
ask, I think we about asked everything we need to ask, but for the whole presentation.
I know there's gonna be more.
Is, when you talk about, I'm thinking more about what Kay was saying about the county assuming a developer's role in effect. You talk about Baxter, and it looks nice and all that, but Baxter's no public, all of the design standards of Baxter were not imposed by York County. They were imposed by the Springs family.
Well, they do have their own zoning district that they developed specifically for Baxter. And as far as the homes there are some, design standards in the HOAs, I think. But there are, as far as the development goes, there are specific requirements in the ordinance for that neighborhood.
In Baxter?
Yes, it has its own zoning district. T&D is what it's called.
I'm sorry?
T&D, Traditional Neighborhood Development, it has its own zoning district.
Why can't this problem then be handled by this concept, not problem, this concept be handled by leaving it to the developer or the market or whomever to apply for a traditional, whatever it
That's
is,
the thing
district
is-
zoning?
Right, and the problem is those are rare. And the market, the home builders don't have much of an appetite for it.
I know that.
So we're trying to provide the potential homeowners a choice. Do you want the standard conventional development that we see a lot of today, or do you want more of the Baxter-style subdivisions? So you have a choice, because right now the market's not providing it.
And just so everybody understands too, is that this doesn't apply to all the stuff that's been approved. So there's 3,000 homes that are still gonna be built under all this.
Actually, the design standards apply. The subdivision part of those standards do not apply, but the specific design standards will.
Even to like the development agreements and,
Well, it specifically states if there is a development agreement where they
Yeah.
have their own design conditions,
so
they
there's,
will
so
continue.
there's a lot of homes that are under development agreements still
Right.
out there in the Lake Wiley area.
Yes, and our goal was to try to capture some of those.
How much of that, of the existing home, or of the homes that are are permitted, I guess, proposed but not yet built, how many of this would this capture?
So you're asking which ones have been already platted, but not
Not built,
built? There are, this would apply to things that you've seen so far recently, Lakeside Glen. This would apply to Merriway Point. This would not apply to Westport. This would not apply to the end of Paddler's Cove.
Okay,
This would apply to anything else that would come forward to you in the future.
okay.
But
Yeah.
if we let certain ones, if we didn't apply to things like Merriway Point and Lakeside Glen, we would lose the opportunity to apply that to approximately 850 homes, I would say. But we do not apply it to anything in Westport or in that DA that might come in addition to Westport.
Understood. Okay.
Now, there are also, like he was saying, there are certain points that this will apply. So this will apply to the homes, but we can't make Westport go back and, not Westport, but Berry Point go back and redraw their preliminary plat to achieve some of the things that are the block length or certain
But the homes they can do,
The
but
homes,
they can't
anything
do,
vertical
they may
they can
not do the
do?
block length or the open space or stuff like that, but they can do the homes.
Exactly.
Understood, okay. I like it better now.
Okay. Can I move on? Okay. So let me touch on the traditional development standards. This is going to be a little bit of a new idea. So what we found is that the lots that were 50, 55 feet, that typical in the Lake Wiley area, it appeared that the house and the garage were just overwhelming the lot as far as the massing goes. I think I have pictures on the next slide. So we're moving in the direction that if the house is on a lot 60 feet or less in width, that they must alley load that lot so that that mass of that garage is on the rear of the lot. So when you're looking at the front, say you're going down the street, you're looking at the front, you're seeing the mass of the living space, which is, obviously less than what would be the total mass of the living space plus the garage. So you don't have that appearance of it swallowing the lot. That's kind of the idea here. I think I have pictures. And we're speaking to the parking because that's an important point. There is a requirement for on-street parking on those. So you have the alley in the back with the detached garage, which is not required. They do not have to put a garage back there. They could put a driveway, they could put a parking pad, something like that. On the front, then there is a requirement for on-street parking to help with guests. And if they want to live there and park in the front, that's fine. I think I have a picture. So here's an example. This is a similar width lot. And you'll see the house on the bottom, the garage and versus the front door, it swallows the home. This garage is probably 22, 24 foot wide, and the side of the house is another maybe 6 or 8 feet. So you have in total maybe a 30-foot wide house, and the garage is just overly dominant in this case. So on the top picture, you'll see that what we do is we put the garage in the back. You cannot see it at all from the front, so you have a nice, clear, prominent entry. You have the living space. You have a nice sidewalk. It's much more pedestrian friendly, or attractive for the person who, if you're driving down the street, you see all the fronts of the homes instead of all these just garages and driveways. All right, so I'm going to stop here for questions on the 60-foot width requirement. This is also a requirement that Rock Hill has moved forward with and adopted, so that's where the idea came from. Any questions on this particular?
I guess just my only, I would just ask, can we just change it so all the equipment, you talk about equipment screening?
I have trouble hearing you with the mask.
I'm sorry, can we just, there's a couple mentions in here about equipment screening being on the side or can we just not have them all in the rear just to make it a little bit more uniform?
AC units and stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, especially if you go back to that last slide, the picture on the top, I mean, putting AC units in those narrow areas really makes it difficult. I
can understand that, yes.
I think it would be easier if it was just more of a uniform standard. It could all be done in the rear of the house. Especially if you have narrow setbacks. I mean, if there's wider lots, I'd be more open to that.
But there are gonna be wider lots on a lot of them. So, I think having it be an option, on a house like this, they'd probably choose to put it in the back because there's not enough space on the side, but on a wider lot, I think, you can go on the side or the back.
Okay.
I'm thinking homeowner choice, they might want it on the side because it's not as loud when they're in the back.
Right.
In their outdoor living space, they'll be required to have.
And you'll see here that under the traditional development standards, the side setback is 5 feet versus 10 feet for your conventional development. So you have a point there for the traditional development standards, because you say of an AC unit, you got a 5-foot setback, it's gonna be hard to cut around it and such. So that's a good point.
Brian, you mentioned, I thought I understood you to say that somewhere in Rock Hill, there is now new development with an alley component.
Yeah, Rock Hill
Riverwalk?
is the one that first enacted
Oh,
the
Riverwalk.
60-foot. Huh? Oh, no, I was mentioning, it's in the county in the Fort Mill area. It's called Braden.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I thought you said Rock Hill, something about Rock Hill, though. Having
Rock
something.
Hill was the first to enact the 60-foot or less rear-loaded requirement. That's where we got
60-foot what?
what we're talking about right now.
Right.
That came from Rock Hill.
Does that presuppose service of the parking for the homeowner by an alley?
No, the parking, it could be in what they can do, they have an option. They can,
I know you don't have to go into all that. You
Okay.
just mentioned Rock Hill, and I thought, maybe I misunderstood. I was thinking you were saying there was already somewhere in Rock Hill, they've adopted a similar standard from the government.
yes.
The city government adopted some similar standard
Yes.
with having to do with alleys.
Yes, that is part of the rear-loaded requirement for lots less than 60 foot wide.
In-
It goes together with.
In the city of
that.
Rock Hill.
Yes.
And where is that subdivision? Riverwalk? Is that what you guys are telling me?
I'm almost positive it's there.
Riverwalk does have alleys, but that code is part of their code no matter what, throughout the entire city of Rock Hill. If you go less than 60 feet, you must put an alley.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, 60, I see.
If you
It's
have
got to
a
do with
less
lot
than-
width
If
entirely.
your lot width is less than 60 feet, you
I
must
get
put an alley,
I get it. I get it.
or rear load it somehow.
Thank
I
you.
thought the other option was having the garage totally in the rear of the lot. Like just
Yeah,
not,
you can just have,
I thought Rock, I'm not gonna beat this point, but I thought Rock Hill had a provision. It was either an alley or the garage had to be in the rear of the house.
Yes.
right.
That's what, okay.
Oh, okay, oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
you could do it without an alley, but you basically had to drive around the back of the house to get to the garage.
Right.
Would this be a good time to take a 5-minute bathroom break? Let everybody just take a few minutes
If you
before we
choose
finish
to,
up?
sure. Yeah.
Is that fine? Okay. We all good on that? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
recording. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the, single-family attached, which is otherwise known as townhomes. So the, aspirations here, so we're going to apply this to all townhomes developed with a preliminary plat that was approved after January 1st, 2021, which is going to be anything because it's been on a moratorium for quite some time. So some of the things that we're going to be requiring is a building separation. So we don't want the back of the townhomes to be so close to the back of another townhome, so it's just they're looking at each other and have very little space to work with in the rear. We want open space in the townhome developments. Currently, we don't have requirements for that. Buffers, that's something else that we're lacking in the current ordinance. And we want to provide better access to natural areas within the development. So that all will change the whole form of how a subdivision development is laid out. The outdoor living area, that's a new concept that we borrowed from Rock Hill to provide, typically a townhome, they put a little 10 by 10 slab on your, the edge of your back property, and that's it. We would like to see more than that. So an outdoor living area is going to require a minimum, I think it's 288 square feet to go in the back or in the front in some kind of a courtyard fashion, or it can be split among the 2 levels of a front porch somewhere. So if you're living in a townhome, you have outdoor space that's yours, not just community space. We want to enhance the appearance of the townhomes. You'll see townhomes these days where the front is on the side of the building, so you can't really see where the entrance to some of these units are, and we're looking to make those fronts more prominent. The facades, we want a mixture of stone and brick and siding, in some form. Projections and recesses, we don't want the flat fronts on townhomes. We want the entrances to be, like I said, prominent before. So we want the townhomes to kind of have their own definition. So it doesn't just look like one flat plane with, kind of hidden entrances along that plane. Off-street guest parking, that's something we currently don't require. We've noticed that townhomes, as you mentioned before, you have these, small, short driveways, so there's nowhere to park because the driveways are just right on top of each other. There's no place to park. So we would be requiring off-street guest parking throughout the development. Let's see. So here are some regional pictures. The top 2 are what we're aspiring to have. You mix of materials, a prominent entrance, so not the the garage door with the kind of hidden front door. We don't want that appearance anymore. The monotonous facade, we don't want just your, kind of bland, typical looking townhomes. I think that's all I have, yes. So I'm gonna stop here for questions. Any specific questions?
You talk about required outdoor living area. Will those will be a part of each individual lot?
Yes.
Or is that?
That is your
okay.
private space.
Okay. And then you also talked about having more separation specifically in between the backs of the
Yes.
units. Are you going to also require those areas be improved to act more as more of a common gathering open space area? Or I just don't want it to, if they leave it natural, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't want it to be like the utility corridor, where it's just a bunch of utility pedestals and.
I don't have any language in here that's going to require it to be upfitted in some way. I mean, they can just have grass out there, and the individual units can put up their own, walls
Yeah.
or whatever they want to do to kind of make their own space, to define their own spaces. But no, I don't have anything to actually improve that area in between.
Okay. So for the outdoor living area, if, for example, they had rear-loaded garages for the townhome, is there, I mean, that would push that, living space to the front, but is there a way they could, also, utilize the back areas so they can count that as well?
We have it in here that it would have to be contiguous space. So in your example, say you have one of these townhomes, let's say in the upper right, you have a garage and it's detached and there's an area of space between the house and the garage, you can make that your outdoor space.
Okay, thank you.
And Rock Hill, who, like I said, is behind this idea, they said what they've been seeing is where they actually make a courtyard in the front. And you kind of maybe put a wall or hedging, or so when you walk in, you kind of come on the sidewalk, you see they're open, their outdoor living area before you get to the entrance of the home.
Okay.
But don't you have in here something that the front door can't be more than 4 feet back? Because I specifically remember writing something about no courtyards.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry. I thought I read something in here, though, about no courtyards.
That is for single-family homes.
So that was
a
for the
courtyard home is something different.
Okay, so for the attached, it would be okay.
Yeah, a courtyard home is where essentially the driveway is the courtyard.
Yeah, no, it was a note, sorry, it was a note that I put down when I was reading through it. Because it said something about the front door couldn't be more than, was it
4 feet behind the
4 feet from
facade.
the,
Yep, we don't want that door recessed and kind of hidden.
okay. Thanks.
Any more questions before I move on?
Townhomes or,
All of these are townhomes, every single one.
those they don't appear to be attached.
They are attached.
They are?
Yes, they
Okay.
are.
Okay.
The way it is, you have it goes back, say, 20 feet, and then they're attached. It's very nice. They're up in Cornelius. Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. Okay, so now we're gonna move into multifamily, so apartments, condominiums. So we're going to apply this to all multifamily development approved after January 1st, so that's gonna be anything because we had the moratorium. So we want to create a pedestrian-oriented multifamily community. So this is going to be a different layout than what you probably are used to. So I brought some pictures to kind of give you an idea what we're trying to do. So we want to orient the buildings to the street. We don't want to orient the buildings to the parking lots. We want there to be open space, sidewalks, and we want there to be a nice relationship between all of those. And also we have the design standards to enhance the appearance of the buildings. And we have a requirement for at least 4 design elements and various roof forms, just to have better definition of those buildings. You have a massive building, you want to kind of you want to break up that massing so it doesn't appear so large. That was something that the visual preference supported. So I'm going to move into pictures to help with this. Okay. So this is a development in Steel Creek, North Carolina. You'll see, let's see, this thing's got a pointer. There we go, okay. So I pointed out the really important elements that make this different. But you'll see kind of the main idea here is the buildings, the living area of the buildings are facing the street and the sidewalk, and they have street trees all up and down. So if you live in this area, you can And there's office and retail to the sides of this. You can't see it. But if you come out of these buildings, you'll be walking on a sidewalk with trees and living area. So you have the eyes on the street concept, which is where, you know, people could be looking out of their windows, so it helps deter crime. You have parking lots are on the inside, so when you're driving or walking down the street, you don't see the parking lot, you don't see the cars, you see the buildings and the living area. Building fronts the street or open space, so that's a key concept. And you have the on-street parking. So in our requirements, there is a option to count the on-street parking along with the parking on the inside towards the parking requirements. The breezeways for the buildings, they are hidden from the street. So when you're walking down, you see only living area, you don't see the stairwells. The garages, if there are detached garages, they are also interior to the site. So you have easy access as a resident, but you don't see them when going down the street. So any questions about this picture? Yes. Come on. Whoops. This is Southwest Charlotte. This is if you go up Tryon. Yep. So this is the street view of that same project. So you'll see you have the on-street parking. Whoops. Can someone go back for me? Thank you. So you have the on-street parking. You have the street trees. So if you're walking down there, down the sidewalk, you have the street trees to give you some shade, and you have the parked cars to protect you from any traffic going up and down the street. You have the windows that are looking out. So if you're walking down the sidewalk, you should feel more safe because somebody could be looking out and seeing activity that you don't want. You have the direct entrances to the individual dwellings on the ground floor. So that's something, if you're in a wheelchair, for example, you just roll down the sidewalk and into your unit. Okay, questions about this picture? Okay. So here are some regional examples. So you have the design elements and wreath form. So you got this kind of circular top up here, and then you've got the various kind of repetition of the building here. So you got a lot of articulation in this upper left building. Distinct middle base and top in the upper right. So you've got the top of the building, the kind of white top, and it has a little bit of a design to it. Then you got the middle of the building, which is going to be the stone and the siding. And then you've got the base of the building, which is going to be a brick. And the base, we want it to be more durable, because if you have some kind of sprinklers on your landscaping, you want that to be able to not stain or eat up the side of the building. So projections and recesses is down in the lower left. You got the front porches kind of coming out a few feet. And then also the open space. So you've got a nice little space to enjoy just outside your apartment. Okay, I want to stop here. And any questions about multifamily? Okay. Moving on to the last part is accessory structures. So we want to subordinate the accessory structure, so we do not want it to be bigger in any aspect than the primary structure. We want this to be a quality accessory structure, so the materials need to be quality materials. They need to be consistent with whatever's on the primary structure. We don't want the building coverage to be over, I think it's 40% or something like that. We don't want it to swallow the lot. We want there to be green space on your property to enjoy. We want there to be separation between tall accessory structures and other structures and the property line, and we want to protect the easements, the right-of-ways, and drain fields from putting structures in them. So, questions about this? Okay, we're done. Unless you have any more general questions.
This is probably just more of a statement. As you were reviewing the last set, it struck me that these are all to create a lovelier, more pleasing place to look at, to have some of its safety. I definitely heard that on the multifamily. But like when I think about the neighborhoods, it's to create really more an aesthetically pleasing environment to be in. Yet our current processes allow us to have intersections that are failing and continue to fail. And that just feels like if we're really after quality of life, then we'd figure out how to solve the traffic, how we fund the traffic intersections. Like, I mean, a lot of these are very lovely, but if I can't get out of my neighborhood, I don't know that I'm any happier about it. Does that make sense? It just seems like we're almost an oxymoron in that case. And on the multifamily, I've become even more concerned about the cost of living. I noticed that maybe many of those things could be achieved without increasing the cost of the build. I like the safety components that you discussed. Depending on how deep we go on mix of materials, outdoor living space, we could create an unaffordability factor for multifamily living. And so I'm concerned about that as I look at it.
Any further questions? Okay. And do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
I make a motion to approve the recommendation.
All right. Do we have a second? I'll second. Any further discussion?
Yep. Diane, one more time, the impact of this on the Lake Wiley overlay district only would affect roughly how many homes do we think?
Well, I can't say how many because there's more to be built, so I know that it can affect.
Well, I mean, based on the plats the plats that have been approved so far.
We have 2 plats that have been approved where it would affect, that's Lakeside Glen, which is 425 homes, and Marion Point, which I believe is 399 homes. And then anything else to be coming in the future for the rest of the Lake Wiley area.
Right.
It will not affect those that are built under the Allison Creek Development Agreement, which is the Westport, and anything else developed within that agreement. It also would not affect Paddler's Cove. They already have the development conditions for Paddler's Cove.
So right now,
there's plenty of land out there.
600 houses,
This will affect 800 houses that aren't built yet.
800. I thought that's what you said a little bit ago.
Yeah, plus whatever comes in after that. So
Yeah.
I think the
Well, I
bigger question is
understand
what
that
it won't
after
affect. It won't affect the ones in Daimler.
Correct. So,
Everything else.
so from the discussions with the impact fee last year, we knew there was somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 homes out there that were going to be built, but haven't been built yet. And a number of those are in Westport and Paddler's Cove, but we know there's 800 or so in there. So, I mean, there's a lot of positives in this, and the fact that it's including 800 homes right now that wouldn't have done this previously. It's the reason I'm recommending. I would recommend it.
Well, I wouldn't be able to vote for it if it was anything like a large scale, because philosophically, I'm not sure I agree with it. But I see it as kind of a relatively small experiment of the government being involved in design standards. I don't know how it's going to work out. I think there's some flaws in it. I hope. What council are they going to get this same presentation?
Yes, yes.
They have 2 readings still to go.
3 readings, no, public hearing and 3 readings.
Yeah.
It'll start next month.
This hadn't already been. It's just no. Obviously, it hadn't already been presented because we haven't sent it to them.
Exactly.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? And all opposed? Okay, thank you.
It did pass. Okay.
If what?
I couldn't see,
She was asking if it passed. I said it did pass. But that's just past us. It still goes to council. And
Yep.
there'll be public input at the council meeting. I'm sure there will be plenty of public there. Any questions or comments on the tracking sheet? Okay, we'll accept that as information. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn?
All right, all in favor? We are adjourned.